In the quiet, rolling plains of Montana, under the dim light of a crescent moon, a tired border collie named Max lay motionless in a dusty kennel. His once bright eyes had dulled, his spirit battered by weeks of neglect and rejection. At 7 years old, he was past the age most families sought in a pet, and his coat, matted with dirt, bore the weight of a life that hadn't been kind. Max had stopped barking long ago. His energy, once boundless, had dwindled into a defeated silence. The rescue shelter where Max was housed sat at the edge of town, a facility overwhelmed by too many abandoned dogs and too few adopters. For weeks, visitors passed Max by, their attention drawn to younger, playful puppies whose wags and whimpers begged for love. Max file labeled him difficult, a dog with a history of mistrust and fear. But it wasn't aggression, it was survival. Loud voices and sudden movements made him flinch, remnants of a past no one had bothered to unravel. That evening, as the shelter staff began locking up, Max's fate loomed closer. Tomorrow would be his last day. His kennel needed to be emptied for another arrival. He lay curled in the farthest corner of his cage, the cold metal bars pressing against him like the weight of inevitability. He didn't whine or scratch. He just existed, waiting for the end. Miles away, in a small farmhouse lit by the glow of a single lamp, Claire Morrison was scrolling through her laptop. A veterinarian with a heart as vast as the Montana sky, Claire had spent years healing animals. Yet her own heart carried an ache she couldn't name. She lived alone, the echoes of her workdays stretching long into her nights. That evening, as she scrolled past mundane social media posts, a grainy photo stopped her in her tracks. It was Max. The picture showed a dog lying forlornly in his kennel, his dark, soulful eyes staring back through the screen. The caption beneath it was simple but devastating. Max, 7 years old. Needs a home by tomorrow, or he'll be put to sleep. Claire's breath caught. Something about Max's eyes, their quiet plea, struck a chord. She closed the laptop, but his image lingered. She paced the room, reasoning with herself. Her schedule was grueling, her home too quiet, and Max wasn't the kind of dog people picked for companionship. Still, the thought of those empty eyes haunted her. The following morning, Claire arrived at the shelter just as the staff unlocked the doors. Max didn't rise when she approached his cage. He didn't wag his tail or bark. But when she crouched down and met his gaze, a flicker of recognition passed between them, a fragile spark that dared to hope. "Can I see him outside the kennel?" Claire asked softly, her voice steady but her heart pounding. The staff hesitated. "He's been through a lot. He's not exactly affectionate," one of them warned. "That's okay," Claire replied. "I just need to meet him." In the small outdoor pen, Max stood stiffly, his movements cautious. Claire knelt down, holding out her hand without expectation. Slowly, Max approached, his nose twitching as he sniffed her fingers. It wasn't trust, it wasn't even comfort, but it was a start. Claire felt tears welling up, but she blinked them back. She knew what this moment meant. Max wasn't giving up, and neither would she. "I'll take him," she said, her voice firm. The shelter staff exchanged surprised glances. "Are you sure? He's not an easy dog." Claire smiled faintly. The best ones never are. That day, Max left the shelter for the first time in weeks, his fragile frame stepping cautiously into the world outside. As Claire drove him home, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Max sat in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the horizon. For the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't alone. And for Claire, the farmhouse felt less empty that night, filled instead with the quiet beginnings of hope. The harsh scent of disinfectant lingered as Claire followed Karen down the narrow corridor, each step amplifying the sound of barking and whining. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she kept moving, gripping the phone in her hand like a lifeline. When they reached the last cage, Claire's breath caught. Max lay curled in the corner, his large frame hunched as if trying to disappear into the shadows. His coat, once a sleek black, was dull and patchy, and the scars scattered across his body told stories of a painful past. Claire knelt down in front of the cage, ignoring the damp floor beneath her. "Hey, buddy," she whispered softly. Max didn't move. His dull eyes flicked toward her briefly before turning away, as though he had given up on the idea of kindness. Karen crossed her arms, her expression stern but not unkind. He's not like the others. He doesn't come to the front of the cage, doesn't wag his tail. He's shut down. I can see that, Claire murmured, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. She reached out, her fingers curling around the cold metal bars. But he's still here. That means there's hope. Karen hesitated. He's been returned twice. Both adopters said he was too aggressive. He's not dangerous, just scared. But people don't give him the chance to show that. Claire didn't look away from Max. Then I'll give him that chance. The shelter manager sighed, unlocking the cage. All right, but don't say I didn't warn you. As the cage door creaked open, Claire stayed where she was, giving Max space. She didn't reach out, didn't make any sudden movements. Instead, she spoke gently. Hi, Max. My name's Claire. I know life hasn't been kind to you, but I'm here now. Max's ears flicked at the sound of her voice, a subtle reaction that gave Claire a sliver of hope. She lowered her hand, palm up, and waited. Slowly, cautiously, Max turned his head toward her. His nose twitched as he caught her scent, and after what felt like an eternity, he inched forward, his movements stiff and hesitant. When his nose finally brushed against her hand, Claire felt tears prick her eyes. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. She smiled softly. That's it, boy. One step at a time. Karen watched in silence, her arms still crossed. If you're sure about this, the paperwork's at the front desk. Claire nodded, her eyes never leaving Max. I'm sure. The ride home was quiet. Max sat in the back seat, his head resting on his paws. He didn't tremble or whimper, but his eyes stayed fixed on the window, watching the world pass by. Claire stole glances at him in the rearview mirror, her chest tight with a mixture of worry and determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew it was worth it. When they arrived at her small farmhouse, Claire opened the car door and stepped aside, giving Max the freedom to move at his own pace. He hesitated at first, his paws hovering over the edge of the seat. Then, slowly, he hopped down, his legs trembling slightly as they touched the ground. Claire led him to the house, keeping her movements calm and deliberate. Inside, she had prepared a corner for him with a soft bed, fresh water, and a bowl of food. This is your home now, Max, she said, kneeling beside him. No more cages. No more fear. Max didn't lie down right away. He stood in the middle of the room, his body tense, his eyes scanning every corner. But as Claire sat quietly on the floor, he finally lowered himself onto the bed, letting out a deep sigh that seemed to carry years of exhaustion. That night, as Claire lay in her own bed, she heard the soft shuffle of paws on the wooden floor. She turned her head and saw Max standing in the doorway, his silhouette illuminated by the moonlight. He didn't come closer, but he didn't retreat either. He simply stood there, watching her. Good night, Max, Claire whispered, her heart swelling with hope. For the first time in years, both of them felt the faint stirrings of a new beginning. Claire stood at the doorway of her small apartment, watching Max as he took his first tentative steps inside. His body was stiff, his movements deliberate, as though each step was a test of the ground beneath him. The once intimidating German Shepherd seemed smaller now, his spirit weighed down by months of abandonment and fear. It's okay, Max, Claire said softly, her voice breaking the silence. She crouched low, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. This is your home now. Max sniffed the air, his nose twitching as he took in the unfamiliar smells. The cozy apartment was a stark contrast to the cold, sterile confines of the shelter. The faint scent of fresh kibble wafted from the kitchen, and the dog bed near the window was a clear invitation. Yet Max stood rooted to the spot, his eyes scanning the room with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Claire let him take his time, knowing that trust wouldn't come easily. She placed his leash on the counter and walked toward the kitchen. Are you hungry, boy? She asked, her voice light as she scooped some kibble into his bowl. The sound of food hitting the ceramic bowl echoed through the quiet apartment, and Max's ears perked up slightly. She stepped away, giving him space, and watched as he cautiously approached the bowl. His movements were hesitant, his eyes darting toward her every few seconds as if expecting the kindness to vanish. When he finally lowered his head to eat, Claire exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Good boy," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. That evening, Claire sat cross-legged on the floor, a book in her lap, while Max lay a few feet away. He hadn't ventured onto the dog bed she'd carefully arranged for him, but instead chose the corner nearest the door, his body curled into a tight ball. The room was quiet except for the occasional rustle of paper as Claire turned a page. She glanced at Max often, her heart aching at his guarded posture. She wanted so badly to reach out, to show him he was safe, but she knew better than to rush him. As the hours passed, a shift began to take place. Max stretched out slightly, his head resting on his paws, his eyes watching Claire with a mix of uncertainty and faint curiosity. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give her hope. Before heading to bed, Claire left her bedroom door open. She laid down, the day's emotions swirling in her mind, and closed her eyes. In the middle of the night, the soft patter of paws on the wooden floor woke her. Claire remained still, her heart pounding as she sensed Max's presence. She opened her eyes to find him standing in the doorway, his silhouette illuminated by the glow of the streetlight outside. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Max didn't move, but he didn't retreat either. He stood there, his eyes meeting hers for a moment before he lay down in the doorway, his body still facing her. For the first time since she brought him home, Claire felt the fragile beginnings of trust. It was a small gesture, but to her, it spoke volumes. "Good night, Max," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a glimmer of hope. The journey ahead would be long, but for the first time, Claire knew they were on the right path together. Claire watched as Max patrolled the apartment, his movements cautious and deliberate. Every step seemed to carry the weight of his past, his nose brushing the ground as though searching for hidden dangers. When he reached the dog bed she had set up near the window, he sniffed it briefly, then retreated to a corner near the door, curling into a tight ball. His eyes never left Claire, following her every move with a mix of curiosity and fear. She sighed, her chest tightening at the sight of him, so withdrawn. Claire had prepared herself for this, knowing trust would take time, but seeing Max so closed off was harder than she'd anticipated. Crouching down a few feet away, she spoke softly. "It's okay, Max. You're safe here. No one's gonna hurt you." For a moment, his gaze softened, but he didn't move. Deciding to give him space, Claire retreated to the kitchen to prepare dinner, hoping the smell of food might coax him out of his shell. She left a bowl of kibble and fresh water near his corner, careful not to push him. By the time she returned with her own meal, Max was still in his spot, his head resting on his paws, his eyes heavy with uncertainty. Over the next few days, a delicate rhythm began to form. Claire allowed Max to set the pace, never forcing interaction, but always making her presence known. She spent hours sitting on the floor near his corner, reading a book or scrolling through her phone, letting him grow used to her proximity. Gradually, his posture began to relax, his muscles no longer tense with every movement she made. One evening, as Claire sat on the couch watching TV, she felt the faintest pressure against her leg. Looking down, she froze. Max had approached her, his nose gently nudging her knee. Her heart skipped a beat, afraid that even the slightest movement might scare him away. Slowly, she reached out, her hand hovering above his head before resting gently on his fur. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Max didn't pull away. He stood there for a moment, his amber eyes meeting hers before retreating to his corner. Claire sat frozen, her chest swelling with a mix of relief and joy. It was a small step, but to her, it felt monumental. The days stretched into weeks, and bit by bit, Max began to change. At first, it was barely noticeable, a hesitant wag of his tail when Claire called his name, or the way he followed her from room to room, keeping a cautious distance but always staying close enough to watch her. Each tiny victory felt like a triumph, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. The first time Max lay on the dog bed she had prepared for him, Claire nearly cried. It was such a simple act, yet it spoke volumes about the progress they had made together. She celebrated quietly, not wanting to overwhelm him, but her heart swelled with pride and hope. By the end of the second week, Max had begun to meet her eyes more often, his gaze less guarded. He still flinched at sudden movements and loud noises, but he no longer seemed weighed down by constant fear. Claire knew there was still a long road ahead, but each step forward brought them closer to something beautiful. As she sat on the floor one evening, her back against the couch, and Max resting his head on her lap, she couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. "You're safe now," she whispered, running her fingers gently through his fur. Max let out a deep sigh, his body sinking further into her lap. For the first time, he looked at peace. That night, as Claire drifted off to sleep, she felt the faintest touch of warmth against her side. Opening her eyes, she saw Max lying next to her bed, his body relaxed, his eyes closed. It was the first time he had chosen to be so close, and it filled her with a quiet joy. Max's journey was far from over, but in that moment, Claire knew they were on the right path. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Claire watched Max as he slowly began to trust her, step by step. Each small gesture a glance, a wag of his tail was proof that he was starting to believe this new life might not be so bad after all. One evening, after a long day at work, Claire decided it was time to take their progress a step further. Grabbing a leash, she knelt down in front of Max, holding it out for him to see. "What do you think, buddy? Want to go for a walk?" Max tilted his head, his ears perking slightly at the sight of the leash. It was the most curious expression Claire had seen from him yet. Encouraged, she clipped it onto his collar and opened the front door. Max hesitated, his eyes darting to hers as if seeking reassurance. She gave him a gentle pat. "It's okay. Let's go." As they stepped outside, the cool evening air greeted them. The neighborhood was quiet, the streets lined with trees rustling softly in the breeze. At first, Max moved cautiously, his body low and his steps tentative. But as they walked, he began to relax, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air, taking in the new scents. For Claire, the moment was bittersweet. She couldn't help but wonder how long it had been since Max had last enjoyed something as simple as a walk. How many years had he spent confined to a cage, deprived of the freedom every dog deserves? As they turned a corner, a middle-aged man with a cheerful golden retriever approached. Claire tensed, unsure how Max would react. She stopped, holding the leash firmly but gently. "It's okay, Max," she murmured, her voice calm. The golden retriever wagged its tail enthusiastically, its owner offering Claire a friendly smile. "New dog?" he asked. Claire nodded. "This is Max. I adopted him a few weeks ago." The man crouched slightly, keeping a respectful distance while offering a hand for Max to sniff. Max froze, his body stiffening, and Claire felt the tension ripple through the leash. For a moment, she feared he might lunge. Instead, Max stepped back, his eyes wary but not aggressive. "Good boy," Claire said softly, relieved. The neighbor straightened, giving her an understanding nod. "You're doing great. It takes time, but they always come around." Claire smiled, grateful for the encouragement. As they continued their walk, Max grew more confident. His steps became steadier, his ears more relaxed. By the time they returned home, he was walking beside her, his head held just a little higher than before. That night, as Claire settled onto the couch with a cup of tea, Max surprised her again. He walked over to her, his tail wagging ever so slightly, and rested his head on her lap. Claire froze, her breath catching in her throat. She set her cup aside and gently ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the warmth of his trust for the first time. "You're a good boy, Max," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're gonna be okay." For the first time since she had brought him home, Max seemed truly at peace. His eyes closed, his breathing steady, and Claire couldn't help but smile. Their journey was far from over, but in that quiet moment, she knew they were on the right path. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Claire's breath caught as the words sunk in, dogfighting operation. The possibility was a shadow that made Max's scars and fearfulness suddenly make heartbreaking sense. She glanced over at him, lying near the window, his eyes still alert and wary, as if he were guarding her from unseen threats. The pieces of Max's behavior began falling into place: the flinches, the low growls, the tension in his body. Claire's heart ached at the thought of what he must have endured, the pain and fear he'd carried for so long. But now, it wasn't just about healing him. She realized she might have to protect him from more than his memories. Later that day, Claire took extra precautions, locking all the doors and drawing the curtains. Max stayed close by, his presence a mix of comfort and a reminder of the lingering unease. She knew she had to be strong for him and for herself. She couldn't let fear creep into the sanctuary they were building together. Determined to understand more, Claire reached out to a local animal rescue organization that specialized in rehabilitating dogs rescued from fighting rings. They confirmed her suspicions. If Max had come from that world, there was a chance he had been conditioned to fight, forced into violence he never wanted. But they also reassured her that with patience and love, many dogs like Max were able to live full, happy lives. As the week went on, Claire couldn't shake the memory of the mysterious car. She began taking small measures to feel safer, installing a camera on the porch and keeping her phone nearby at all times. She also found herself more attuned to Max's signals. His growls and postures, once worrisome, now felt like a language she was beginning to understand. He wasn't just her companion, he was her protector. One evening, while they were in the backyard, something remarkable happened. Claire had brought out Max's favorite toy, a soft rope she'd introduced weeks ago. As she tossed it gently, Max hesitated, his ears twitching. Then, for the first time, he bounded after it, his movements awkward but filled with determination. He brought the rope back, dropping it at her feet with a tentative wag of his tail. "Good boy, Max," Claire exclaimed, her voice brimming with joy. She crouched down to stroke his head, and for the first time, Max pressed into her touch, leaning his weight against her as if surrendering to her love. It was a breakthrough moment, a small victory against the shadows of his past. That night, as they sat on the couch, Claire couldn't help but reflect on how far Max had come. But she also knew their journey was far from over. The shadows of his past might never fully disappear, and she might never know exactly what haunted him. But what she did know was that together, they were building something stronger than fear, a bond forged in trust, patience, and unwavering love. Claire looked down at Max, his head resting peacefully on her lap. "Whatever happens, we're in this together," she whispered. Max's eyes met hers, and in that quiet moment, it felt like he understood. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, determined to leave the past behind and embrace the life they were creating, one step at a time. Claire set down her coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at Max. His golden eyes met hers, filled with quiet intensity, as if he understood the weight of the moment. She crouched down beside him, gently running her fingers through his fur. "Whatever it takes," she whispered. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." The revelation about Max's past haunted her. The scars, the fear, the way he seemed to scan every shadow, it all made sense now. Someone out there was looking for him, and the thought of him being dragged back into that nightmare was unbearable. Claire knew she had to act quickly, not just for Max, but for her own peace of mind. She spent the morning making calls. First, she contacted the local police department. Then, she reached out to a friend who worked in cybersecurity, explaining her fears. "Can you help me trace anything about this car or these people?" she asked. Her friend promised to dig into it, but even as she hung up, Claire knew that answers might take time. In the meantime, she needed to ensure Max was safe. She drove to a nearby pet supply store and bought a sturdy lock for the backyard gate, along with a GPS tracker to attach to Max's collar. Back at home, she installed the tracker, testing it to make sure she could monitor his location from her phone. It wasn't much, but it gave her a small sense of control. That afternoon, Claire decided to take Max on a walk. She needed fresh air, and she hoped it would help ease the tension that had settled over both of them. As they strolled through the quiet neighborhood, Max stayed close to her side, his ears twitching at every sound. He was alert but calm, and for a moment, Claire allowed herself to believe that maybe things would be okay. But as they rounded a corner, she noticed a black car parked near the edge of the street. Her heart sank. It wasn't the same car from the night before, but it was too similar for comfort. Max's body stiffened, his hackles rising, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Claire tightened her grip on the leash, her voice low and soothing. "It's okay, Max. I've got you." She quickened her pace, keeping Max close as they passed the car. The windows were tinted, offering no clue as to who might be inside. Her pulse raced, but she forced herself to stay calm until they were back home. Once inside, she locked the door and sat on the floor next to Max. Her hands shook as she stroked his fur. "It's gonna be okay," she said, more to herself than to him. "We'll figure this out." That night, Claire made a decision. She pulled out her laptop and began researching protection dogs. Max had been through enough. She didn't want to turn him into something he wasn't, but she realized she needed to prepare herself for any threat. She signed up for a self-defense class and made a note to talk to her neighbor, who was a retired police officer. As she climbed into bed, Max followed her, settling at the foot of the bed as he always did. But this time, instead of curling into a tight ball, he stretched out, resting his head near her feet. Claire reached down, brushing her fingers over his fur. "You're safe now," she whispered, "and I'll keep it that way." For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. They had a long road ahead, but Claire knew one thing for certain. She and Max were in this together, and she wouldn't stop fighting until they were truly free from his past. Claire tightened her grip on Max's leash as the farmhouse door creaked open, revealing her old friend Lisa standing on the porch. Lisa's warm smile was the first reassuring thing Claire had seen in days. "You made it," Lisa said, stepping down to greet her. Her eyes drifted to Max, whose tail wagged cautiously, the tension in his body easing slightly as he sniffed the unfamiliar air. Claire managed a weak smile. "Thanks for letting us stay. Things have been complicated." Lisa glanced at Max again, her expression softening. "You're both safe here. Let's get you settled." Inside, the farmhouse was cozy and welcoming, with a crackling fire in the hearth and the faint scent of lavender in the air. Max padded cautiously around the room, sniffing each corner as if cataloging every detail of this new sanctuary. Claire set down her bag and watched him, her chest tightening with a mix of relief and lingering fear. For the first time in days, Max seemed at ease. His posture was less guarded, and his eyes no longer darted nervously at every shadow. Claire knelt beside him, running her fingers through his fur. "This is it, Max," she said softly. "This is our fresh start." That evening, as rain began to patter against the windows once more, Claire and Lisa sat at the kitchen table, cups of tea warming their hands. Claire recounted the events of the past few days, the mysterious car, the man on the porch, and the unsettling call from the shelter. Lisa listened intently, her brow furrowing with concern. "Whoever that was, they're not giving up easily," Lisa said finally. "But you're safe here. No one knows about this place except the people you trust." Claire nodded, her gaze drifting to Max, who was lying near the fireplace, his head resting on his paws. The glow from the flames reflected in his eyes, giving him an almost peaceful appearance. But Claire knew better. Beneath that calm exterior was a dog who had survived horrors she could only imagine. As the night deepened, Max startled Claire by standing and walking over to her. He rested his head on her lap, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. She stroked his head gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know who hurt you, Max, but they're not going to find you here. Not ever." Lisa spoke up, her tone practical but kind. "We should keep a low profile for a while. I can help you set up cameras around the property, just in case." "Thank you," Claire replied, her gratitude evident in her voice. "I just want him to feel safe." The following days were a balm for both Claire and Max. The countryside's quiet rhythm began to soothe her frayed nerves, and Max's transformation was remarkable. He explored the expansive yard, his tail wagging more freely with each passing hour. The scars on his body remained, but there was a lightness to his step that Claire hadn't seen before. One afternoon, Claire decided to test the limits of Max's growing trust. She picked up a tennis ball from the porch and held it up. "What do you think, boy? Want to play?" Max tilted his head, his ears perking up. It was the first time she'd seen him show interest in a game. She tossed the ball a few feet away, and Max hesitated before trotting after it. When he returned, the ball clutched gently in his jaws. Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. "Good boy," she said. "You're starting to believe again, aren't you?" The simple act of fetching the ball felt monumental. For Claire, it was more than just a game. It was proof that Max's spirit was mending. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Claire sat on the porch with Max lying at her feet. The peace of the countryside wrapped around them, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. "We've got this," she whispered, her hand resting on Max's back. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Max let out a contented sigh, his eyes closing as the last rays of sunlight warmed his face. For the first time in weeks, Claire felt something she hadn't dared to hope for: peace. Max gave a small, joyful bark as Claire knelt down and wrapped her arms around him. "You're my family now," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No one will ever hurt you again." Max leaned into her embrace, his once guarded eyes now reflecting trust and love. Their journey together had been nothing short of extraordinary, a transformation from despair to hope, from fear to freedom. Max's scars, both visible and hidden, told a story of survival, pain, and endurance. But now, they also spoke of healing, resilience, and the undeniable power of compassion. Claire's determination to provide Max with a life of love and safety proved that even the most broken spirits could be mended. With patience and unwavering care, she gave him the second chance he never thought possible. Max, in turn, taught Claire the beauty of unconditional love and the strength that comes from facing challenges together. Max wasn't just a rescue dog. He was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, brighter days lie ahead. Together, Claire and Max overcame the shadows of his past, forging a bond built on trust and mutual healing. As they sat together on the farmhouse porch, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Max rested his head on Claire's lap, his tail wagging softly. In that quiet moment, the world felt whole, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow seemed within reach. If Max's story touched your heart, let it inspire action. There are countless animals waiting for their second chance, longing for someone to see their potential and believe in their worth. Together, we can rewrite their stories and spread hope one rescue at a time. Max's journey from a shelter dog on the brink of despair to a beloved companion is a poignant reminder of the transformative power of compassion, patience, and resilience, qualities that are just as vital in our own lives. In the fast-paced, sometimes isolating world we live in, it's easy to overlook the broken parts of ourselves or others, assuming that healing is either impossible or too difficult to achieve. Yet Max's story demonstrates that with consistent effort and genuine care, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal and trust can be rebuilt. Applying this to our daily lives means embracing the idea of second chances, not just for others, but for ourselves. We often carry invisible scars, remnants of past failures, fears, or traumas, and these can make us guarded, hesitant, or unwilling to open up to new opportunities. Just as Claire gave Max the space and patience he needed to feel safe again, we can approach our own healing journeys with kindness and persistence. Surrounding ourselves with supportive people who see our potential rather than focusing on our flaws is crucial for personal growth. Moreover, Max's story challenges us to extend our compassion to others who may be struggling silently. A kind word, an act of understanding, or simply being present can mean the world to someone who feels overlooked or abandoned. The ripple effect of such small gestures can create a brighter, more connected community. In practical terms, this might mean volunteering at a shelter, mentoring someone in need, or taking time to reconnect with a friend or family member who has been distant. It's about realizing that while we may not be able to change the world for everyone, we can change the world for someone, and that matters. Max's transformation wasn't just about a dog finding a home. It was about a bond that inspired both parties to grow stronger together. Let his story remind you that no matter how broken or daunting a situation seems, love, patience, and action can lead to a brighter tomorrow. Take small, meaningful steps today, whether for yourself or someone else, and watch the power of second chances unfold. If this story touches your heart, take a moment to reflect on the power of resilience and love. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more incredible stories.